Good afternoon. Didn't David make it all sound very exciting and big and somewhat easy, potentially even, right? So I thought what we could start off with, and he warmed you up, so we are expecting answers for some of this today. What are these brands? Big global retail brands. We all love them. We shop with them. We drink their coffee. What do they have in common? They're global, yeah. Anything else? Success stories? Successful, yeah.
Coffee.
Big, successful retailers that all sell coffee, maybe. They all failed. Exactly. You're absolutely right. Tesco's went to the US about 6 years ago and opened up 199 stores in California, fresh and easy stores. They packed their bags and came back home about 6 years later and had 1.2 million deficit on the back of it. Starbucks tried to go into Australia and into Israel and had to wrap up because they didn't resonate with the local users. And Best Buy came to the UK, big box operations. Everybody thought that Dixon's, Comet, etc. were dead. We would never see them again. Best Buy was going to rule electronics for the UK and failed miserably, went back home because they didn't manage to adapt to the local consumer. And the same happened for them in China, and the same happened for them in Turkey. So this is not easy. Export is not easy. However, it is an undeniable trend. And when we start laying bare some of the facts that we're seeing, we can see domestic growth far outpacing international growth, far outpacing domestic growth. In some categories, if we look at education as an example, about 10x the rate, travel, 4x the rate, retail, about double the pace of growth from international consumers versus domestic consumers. If we look at who's doing well in this space, it's actually the small and medium-sized businesses doing very well. The big businesses falling behind. Small and medium businesses, agile, fast-moving. About, I think it's 47% is the exact number of that traffic comes from international sources. And if we look at business models, pure players outpacing multi-channel retailers. Again, maybe no surprise in that one. Fast, agile, moving, digital first into international, getting about a third of all their traffic from international consumers. Growing, as a result, 2 to 3 times faster than their multi-channel peers. A lot of the stats and a lot of the findings come from a collaboration that we've done with OC&C, and David has already alluded to it, and we will distribute this if your phone is not handy just now, but you can request all of the reports and all of the data and insights from the OC&C website afterwards. We've done studies in education and in retail. We've done a previous study in retail UK, and we've just launched one for 6 European markets, as already alluded to. And we love league tables, right? It's an international audience. We love league tables. And my favorite league table at the moment is the Olympic medal league table. Anybody from Holland here? Yeah, ice skating. Yes. Guys, we only do one thing well, and that's ice skating, but we already have 7 medals. Back to this league table, however. Amazon and eBay, no surprise, top of the list, leading international expansion and doing it through digital first. Then followed by a host of specialists, really. And that's quite interesting. Specialisms carry and travel very well when we go international. And not just fashion, but you see others in here, like iHerb, who are more iHerb and Book Depository, etc., who are all in different categories, not just fashion. And German and UK retailers doing particularly well. Again, I see a lot of pictures, unless if you're taking them of me, which you're more than welcome to do. I think we're distributing all the slides. Going back to eBay and Amazon for a second over here, it took them less than 5 years to go international. Over 50% of their business comes from international sales. And look at the market cap of these businesses here. These are the 10 biggest retailers in the world, market cap measured towards the mid of last year. And Amazon's and eBay's market cap in aggregate And I looked this up yesterday. According to the latest figures, is bigger than Walmart right now. And Walmart took about 32, 35 years to internationalize. Tesco, 75 years to internationalize. Digital companies, e-commerce first companies, go international much, much faster than those multi-channel peers. However, going international and exporting will never and can never be a replacement for a great proposition in your home market. Every retailer we spoke to as part of these studies says you have to be great at what you do in your home market first. Export is no replacement for that and will never be a replacement for it. And even the biggest ones and most successful ones, if you look at Amazon, Amazon in their hometown, Seattle, get about 30% of all commerce. Not e-commerce, all commerce, 30%. They can reach over 90% of the US population with same-day or next-day delivery. And they know us better, arguably, than we know ourselves. They know the consumer so intrinsically well that last year, July 2012, somebody made a little spoof video that was watched 800,000 times on YouTube, saying that Amazon was building yesterday shipping. I.e., if I was ordering today, they had already shipped it yesterday. Guess what they just filed? A patent that alludes to exactly that. They might start packaging up your goods before you've even hit the buy button on their site because they know you so incredibly well. They are great at what they're doing. They're great at what they're doing in their home market, and that's why they're succeeding once they're going international. Don't make the mistake to go too fast into international markets if you've got big things to fix in your home market first. Timing is everything when it comes to this. So all of this sounds incredibly attractive, and it sounds easy, right? Well, it probably isn't. We talk a lot about the why you should go international, but what we've recently focused on more and more is how to actually go about it. And as part of the recently launched study with OC&C, we looked at 12 critical factors to success as to what do you actually need to do to go international. Everything from picking the right markets, to finding the right payment solution, to actually how do you get the goods to the front door of the customer. And many of these topics, as David already alluded to, are certainly not in Google's core expertise areas. And therefore, we've got all the specialists lined up today to talk about these areas. And we're going to focus on three in particular. One is, how do you use data and insights to find the right market? Two, how do you go about localizing your proposition? And three, how do you go about acquiring customers across the territories that you picked? So finding the right markets. I think the beautiful thing, I've been at Google for 6.5 years. Before that, I was at Dixon's, actually. And the beautiful thing for me is the amount of data that we have access to. Billions of searches happening every single day all over the world. And we have tools and insights that overlay all of those queries, all of those requests for information, and help us make sense of them and make smarter decisions, real time, constantly updating it. If we look at the study that we did with OC&C, they came up with this league table, and they said, well, size of the market is obviously one thing. Size of the e-commerce market is an important and attractive factor. Two, the language that they speak, English proficiency, especially for English-based retailers, US-based retailers, an important factor. Shipping, payments, taxes, all important factors. And they built this scorecard, and they said, well, if we look at the Netherlands, a lot of those boxes are ticked very favorable. The Netherlands might feature very highly if we just look at this data in isolation when it comes to you stack ranking the markets you might want to go to. Going all the way to the bottom, a country like Russia, for example, market size relatively attractive, but English very tough. And when we start talking about payments and taxes and imports, again, challenging environment. Only recently did the Russians lower import thresholds from almost 1,000 euros to 150 euros before you have to start paying tax. So it's becoming a lot more challenging for high-ticket items and big baskets to go into that market at the moment. So these are great scorecards, but it varies for every single business and clearly for every single business model. And you might start missing out on markets like this if you don't look very closely at the consumer. If we go back to Turkey on the previous slide, Turkey was somewhere in the middle. Relatively small e-commerce market. Nobody speaks English according to this chart. And then challenging times when it comes to shipping and to payments. But when we dissect and go into that market in a bit more detail, we find a young, really energetic, e-commerce, highly digitalized market. Average age is young, booming e-commerce spend, as we can see, and huge amounts of time spent online by that audience. And real success stories. Look at a company like Trendyol. Who's heard of Trendyol? Few hands go up. Trendyol is a company that was founded in 2010 in Turkey. Within 14 months, it had 100 million turnover, and 4 million Turkish consumers signed up to this flash sales site or a variation of flash sales. So all of a sudden, Turkey might become a little bit more attractive when we look at the consumer in combination with the macro factors that we looked at. And then the real-time data, as I was alluding to, we have a bunch of tools, and we'll see these in a lot more detail, live demo it for you tomorrow. Starting off with Google Trends, we could very quickly look at, for example, Turkey in this instance. And here we're looking at swimwear, saying if I wanted to export swimwear to Turkey, what would that market look like compared to markets like Australia and Russia? Things like seasonality become very apparent. Things like year-on-year growth become very apparent. Competitors can be seen and found, etc. But much more on this tomorrow. Once you've done your research, once you've used all the publicly available sources, I would really stress you to start working with your account management teams, with your teams at Google, to go even deeper. All these queries we can aggregate up and say, if we look at swimwear, well, clearly the United States is the biggest market globally in terms of consumer demand for swimwear. However, it's also by far, well, not by far the most expensive one, because Germany is slightly more expensive, but it is an incredibly more expensive market, and the barriers to entry might be slightly higher than you would find elsewhere. So again, make this part of your assessment when you prioritize your markets. Once you narrow it down, and I think this is a critical point, it's all about pace and speed of execution. So Zalando, we've probably all heard the story. Everybody heard of Zalando? German retailer, founded in 2008. German site went live in 2009. Within a year of going live in Germany, they launched their French site. You can see that picking up very rapidly. A year after that, going into Italy and Switzerland. This is a company that was founded in 2008. First site went live in 2009. They now have turnovers of over €1 billion. And I think there are rumors of IPOing for more than 5 billion. This is one of the most exciting companies of the last couple of years. And you can see here, I found this publicly, CEO talking about getting ready for business expansion into 14 European business markets. Very quick expansion once they narrow down on the markets that they want to go into. So once you've narrowed the markets down that you want to go to, it can be a risky and expensive exercise to actually go into those markets. I believe, and this is something that came out of the OC&C study as well, is that by using marketplaces, you have a relatively fast and low cost, low risk point of entry into those markets. What do we mean with marketplaces? There are a whole range of them, from the big ones like eBay and Amazon to the slightly more niche ones like Farfetch and Etsy. And if we think about this, there is something, I think, for every business and every proposition, for every category. eBay and Amazon, mass category, whereas some of the smaller marketplaces will be more tailored and focused. Some of them are targeting mass audiences, others slightly more targeted towards the more affluent consumer. Some of them, like Amazon, will provide a full 360 solution for you. They will ship it, they will take your payment, they will even do your customer service. Others will just provide you elements of that. So pick the right one for you, but this might be a way to very quickly go into new markets and test the waters. And I came across this. I recently met with the CEO of New Look, and luckily a lot of what he told me was already public. New Look is a business that has a huge amount of stores, about 1,000 stores globally, about 18,000 employers, I think, growing their business at about 5% year on year. But online sales are booming. Online sales growing at 78% for them. And a large chunk of that growth was coming from marketplaces. And then when you started to dissect some of that business into UK versus international, we found that about 2/3 of the growth in e-commerce was coming from these marketplaces, and ASOS in particularly being a huge partner. Not only are they getting a huge amount of sales, which clearly is a reason in itself to be present on these marketplaces, they're also getting a phenomenal amount of data and insights from being present on these marketplaces that will help them make decisions as to where the next market is that they might want to enter into. On the back of this data, New Look is entering into Poland, into Russia, and into Germany with more stores based on the data that they got from marketplaces where they are present with their products. So marketplace is a very easy and quick way to get you to tip your toe into the water. Where's New Look going next? I gave it away. China, opening 20 stores in China. And I guess at some point we'll all be thinking about China. Out of every 2 consumers that are coming online to purchase over the next couple of years, one of them is Chinese. Phenomenal market growth, and all the stats line up very favorable. But there's also a problem, I think, with China. And I was listening to a video last night of Hugo Barra, who used to head up Android for us and has since moved to a Chinese mobile provider. And he was talking about mobile apps, for example, in China. And he said out of the top 15 apps in China, every single one of them is made by a Chinese company and is a Chinese app. International players play barely a role when it comes to China. And when it comes to China e-commerce, players like Alibaba are dominating this space. Alibaba has marketplaces. They have a C2C and a B2B marketplace. The C2C marketplace, Taobao, turns over 160 billion worth of revenue every single year. That's twice the turnover of Amazon and eBay combined. That's pretty scary, right? 800 million products listed on that platform alone. They also have a B2C proposition which is called Tmall. And we start thinking about these propositions here, and in markets like China, you might actually never have your own proposition in markets like this. And the only thing you will ever do is host your products and service your customers through marketplaces like Tmall and Taobao. So think about that. In some markets, it's not just a complementary strategy or an entry strategy. It might just be the only strategy in combination with potentially physical store presence on the high street. So once you have a presence in the market, we're all aware that localizing is probably a must. But localizing can be very, very expensive, resource intensive, and obviously cost intensive. So my advice, and I think my message is, do it light and with small incremental steps. What I mean with that is there is no need for you to, on day one, have a fully localized language site in Germany. There is no need to have all the payment solutions in the world integrated on day one without you having tested whether there is even demand for your proposition. Digital allows us to be very quick and agile and to test and learn in real time. So we don't have to go and make those expensive mistakes that we saw up front from Tesco's and others. Language, probably first piece. We're going to touch on this in more detail again tomorrow as well. Local languages. First of all, you can probably reach huge international audiences in your own language, especially if you're from Germany, if you're from the UK. There is a big reach there. Do own language first and see how far that can get you. You'll find there is a big percentage of your traffic already coming from international without you translating it into those local languages. At some point, you might want to start opening your doors in local language to those customers. And we have Google Translate. You've probably used it to translate the menu when you were in Spain on holiday, etc. But it can also be integrated for businesses. And one thing we see is that when non-English speakers are using these plugins, we see significant uplift in conversions. And with significant, I see up to 40% uplifts on conversions, people using this plugin. It is by no means perfect. Stress, it is by no means perfect. If you've crafted for months over your descriptions on products and it's beautifully on brand, every single word, this is not going to do the same thing in all those 40, 60 languages for you. But it's going to open the doors to international consumers that otherwise might not shop with you. Secondly, localizing your look and feel. And we're going to hear more about this later on. But a great example that we came across was Oriflame. Oriflame is a Swedish company, beauty products, about 1.5 billion turnover in sales, present in over 50 markets. And they, as you can see here, really tailor their proposition in every single one of those 50 markets. Not just the products, but also the look and feel of their proposition. So the models that they're using, very different. Just the general sentiment that the site portrays, very, very different in all of those markets. And of course, when we start looking at some of the bigger brands that have the luxury of sponsoring local football teams, heroes, etc., really using that to their advantage. But I think the Oriflame example is great. Glossybox is another example that we looked at who do this very, very well. And then once you have maybe translated a bit and changed the look and feel of your site, how do you go that one step further and really start thinking about the local proposition? What really needs tailoring? What really needs changing? Now, this is a huge success story in the VC space at the moment. Halo, for those of you that have been to Dublin before, or London, or New York, or Toronto, or 16 other cities in the world, this is an app that allows you to find a taxi wherever you are in those cities and connect you with the taxis that are nearby. Some of them might only be 2 minutes away. The driver is desperately trying to get a customer. You're desperately trying to get out of the rain. But you previously were never being connected. This app does that for you. A very young company, but very smart in the way that they look and study at the local industries and the local markets. In the UK, in London, we had a problem because a company called Addison Lee, which provided minicab services, was on demand and you could call and you could book your taxi. Increasingly, black cabs were losing their business to the minicab companies because black cabs could not be ordered on demand. This solves that specific problem. Here in Dublin, the problem was that you had to call for a taxi, and there were companies that were controlling all the calls and distributed amongst the taxi drivers, and therefore they were cutting out the taxi drivers to a certain extent. They solved that problem by having this app in the market. So they're fixing a local problem, they're tailoring their proposition, and they're going as far as actually even tailoring their payment models by market. So if I order this taxi in London, the taxi driver pays Halo a fare for finding me as a consumer. In New York, it's the other way around. In New York, I have to pay Halo to find the taxi, and they take the cut out of my pocket. So interesting examples there. And then finally, going international, I think it would be wrong to assume that the consumer is just going to find you and arrive at your site and do business with you. I think the reality of that is there is a certain level of demand, but at some point you're going to have to work for it. And you're going to have to try and acquire those customers to your sites. And if I quote the ASOS director for international, he actually said it, of course we use brand, but at some point we have to go heavy on online marketing to build a relationship and to build loyalty with our customer base in all those new markets. And that's exactly what they do. And I think at Google we have a great proposition to help you do that. Of course, there are all the paid sources. And our paid sources tend to be very targeted. They tend to be very efficient and very, very accountable. Paid search is an easy way of capturing demand at the bottom of the funnel where people are ready to buy or engage with your services. And we'll see an example where we'll talk about a few examples of companies using that. But then think about all the free sources, all the PRable sources, all the social media sources, whether that is Twitter or Facebook or video. Think about YouTube. Pictures often translate across borders very, very well. Much better than words often. Think about those platforms. And then how do we build brands? At some point, we're going to have to compete with local players and get ourselves known in front of the big public. So building brands internationally will increasingly be important. And PR, frankly, is often one of the first people on the ground, or one of the first partnerships that exporters will engage in, is with a PR agency or somebody on the ground that can do event marketing for them or find local PR opportunities. I love this as an example. It's the Open University. The Open University, remember this against the backdrop of something I mentioned earlier. In education, the demand for UK education institutions from international consumers is growing 10 times faster than the demand growth from local consumers. 10 times faster. It's critical for these institutions to go international. The Open University does not even feature in the top 50 accredited universities in the UK. You can probably list the top 10, Oxford, Cambridge, London School of Economics, etc., all listed in the top 50. Open University does not feature. So what did they have to do? They went after an aggressive strategy in 21 markets to acquire those customers that are increasingly looking for UK educational institutions. And they use search and display, biddable media, a very efficient base there. But they also build a YouTube channel. And I would encourage you to have a look at it. I often speak to fashion brands, as was alluded earlier on. And a brand like Burberry, who we all hold up and look at as incredibly successful and a true global brand, on YouTube have managed to amass about 90,000 subscribers. The Open University have 75,000 subscribers on YouTube. They've built up a huge customer base all over the world and used that channel very, very wisely. And when we looked at their international presence, they actually came up 5th, only just behind Cambridge and Oxford, who are staple brands when it comes to international or UK education abroad. So a great example of a company that was using accountable, efficient digital media, but also look beyond that and use social channels such as YouTube to build a much broader brand. Many of us know this one. Probably a favorite ad of many of the boys, but if we look at this, in 2012, the first version of this ad went live and it was 100 million views. The second one has just gone live and 136 million views. This is a global brand trying to reach a global audience. And what they needed was a global platform to do this in an easy and in an efficient way. An easy and efficient way that is often much better, especially once you go out of your home territory, than TV in this instance. Much easier for them to deal with YouTube than with TV. And they use this. They used YouTube to drive huge engagements with a new audience there. But one thing they did not pay for all of this. They used a technique called seeding, and they sought out big influencers on social networks to start driving a lot of the awareness of their brand and of their video creatives. So they really went into the local markets and they sought out influencers in all of those local markets that could help them spread the message. And I think it's an important message to think about where are existing audiences, where are existing communities that you can tap into in the international markets. Why would you start from scratch, try to build them up, whereas platforms like Facebook, like YouTube, like Twitter already have existing audiences you can tap into ready to go. And this example, who's heard of these guys? SodaStream. Bit of controversy recently, but the reason I thought we still use it, this company is up against some of the biggest brands in the world, Coke, Pepsi, and what they've done for the 3rd year running is do something quite innovative and quite disruptive, actually, in a sense as well, that caused them to have a huge PR storm. And to quote the BBC, they're at the cutting edge of marketing, very much using celebrity endorsement, which is what they did for their video, which we'll play in a second, But also beyond that, looking at the PR opportunities on the back of this, and they created a huge PR storm. I love this. They had 12 million views on this video, a load of press around it that you could not have bought with all the money in the world. And 4 days after the Super Bowl and the banned advert, there were talks of Pepsi actually wanting to buy them now. So this is quite interesting. Let's play the video quickly.
Like most actors, my real job is saving the world. Start with plain water, add bubbles, mix in the perfect flavor. Look, a soda that's better for you and all of us. Less sugar, less bottles. If only I could make this message go viral.
You doing it, Scarlett. Yeah, you doing it. Changing the world, one sip at a time.
Sorry, Coke and Pepsi.
Oh yeah, she done it. SodaStream.
So the Coke and Pepsi gag didn't go down too well because they were two of the biggest sponsors of the Super Bowl. And for the last 2 or 3 years in a row, their proposed ad has been banned, which caused huge PR because they then fed that nicely through to the press. And then this is the uncensored version. But on the back of it got a phenomenal amount of PR and reach. So we talked a lot about digital first, and I talked a lot about why would you be so crazy as to build a store, do it digitally, tip your toes in the water, and really go for a digital first strategy because it's low risk, it's fast, it's agile, and you're going to win. However, there is some benefit to having a physical presence. And as part of the OC&C study, we did look at brands that have a number of stores, like H&M and Adidas, and whether that actually translates into online awareness. And those that have high online awareness and few stores, whether there is a correlation between the two. And I think the bottom line of our findings was that nobody is doing multi-channel particularly well when it comes to internationalizing. Nobody has really figured out how the stores and how a digital presence should talk to each other once we go into new territories. So there is a big open playing field, I think, here to get that right. But the one thing that is probably over and done with is that we can put a cookie-cut solution for the stores in all those different markets. They will have to be localized. They will have to be tailored to the local proposition. Otherwise, you're doomed to fail. And there's many examples of that. And there is probably something to be said for this kind of flagship model, where we look at Apple, we look at Burberry, we look at IKEA, doing it incredibly well and having a marketing tool through flagship presence on the high street. So we're not saying the high street is completely useless when it comes to exporting. It can actually have a real positive impact on your digital presence as well. And I love this example of Uniqlo. Uniqlo is a Japanese clothing retailer, for those of you that are not familiar with them. Very popular in Japan, actually, and huge presence, huge build-out of a store network throughout that country, to the extent that I think they even started to be called Unicommon at some point in Japan. They were so visible and present. In 2001, they came into the UK with about 23 stores, a handful of them also going into the US. And they just took the Japanese proposition and planted it in the UK. They failed miserably. 5 years later, they closed all of those stores. And they've since gone back and rethought that strategy and ended up with a more flagship strategy in prime locations also in London. And now really generating and yielding some of the results of that. So there can be some benefit to being physical and amplifying your brand through physical presence as well. But I would argue that probably comes at a much, much later stage of your export strategy and your evolution into new markets. That's it from me. Just to recap it, I think be fast and use insights and tools to spot the demand. We'll go into that in a lot more detail over the next few days. How do you actually find the markets that you want to win in? Localize, but do it selective and do it light. Don't pump loads of money into big projects before you've really understood the potential and have seen some potential in those markets. And thirdly, use our tools, use our advertising solutions. They stretch across every market in the world to acquire customers in a very efficient and easy way. Thank you very much.